Some people search for love their whole life. Others spend 30, 40, even 50 years beside someone and still feel unknown. But after 60, something shifts. You no longer chase love, you start to recognize it. And once in a rare while, something different happens. Not louder, not bigger, just deeper. A quiet meeting of souls that feels like coming home. Hi, it's Vernon again. And today, I want to speak to something many stop believing in after 60. Soulmates. Not as fantasy, but as memory. Because when you meet yours, these 7 quiet but profound shifts begin to unfold. This isn't about romance novels or fireworks. It's about the way your life begins to feel more honest, more aligned, more whole. And if these words speak to something you felt but never said out loud, consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing for more reflections like this. It helps this quiet little corner of the internet reach those who still believe love is possible at any age. Let's begin with the very first moment when something inside you whispers, "There you are."
When you meet your soulmate, the restlessness finally fades. There's a unique kind of weariness that sets in after 60, not just of the body, but of the heart. A quiet exhaustion from years of giving, hoping, adjusting, and often still feeling unseen. But then something unexpected happens. You meet someone, and suddenly that ache you thought was permanent begins to soften. Not because life becomes simpler or the past disappears, but because for the first time you're no longer at war with yourself. The questions that once haunted your nights, did I ask for too much? Did I settle for too little? Will anyone ever really know me? Don't need answers anymore. Their weight lifts. Your soulmate doesn't arrive with answers, nor do they fill a missing half. What they offer is far rarer: recognition. Not of your achievements, roles, or stories, but of your essence. It's as if they've met the parts of you that even you had forgotten. In their presence, something ancient reawakens. Not a version of you shaped by years of survival, but the unspoken, unpolished truth of who you are underneath it all. And strangely, this isn't a moment of fireworks. It's a moment of stillness, a silence that feels like understanding. You don't feel the need to be impressive, because for once, being understood is more meaningful than being admired. You feel the permission to return to your most natural self without costume or performance. And that quiet recognition, the way they meet your truth without blinking, creates a sanctuary unlike any you've known before. It's not the kind of safety that shelters you from the world, but the kind that makes you brave enough to meet it fully. You are not tamed. You are not told to be less. You are simply received. And from that space, your spirit doesn't shrink. It expands. It doesn't soften your fire. It says, "Let it burn. I am not afraid of its light." Because when someone welcomes your depth without needing to manage it,
something sacred happens. You begin to trust that the most honest version of you is not too much and never was. You find you can speak less and still be understood. You can be still and still feel held. You can stop reaching and yet feel deeply connected. This peace doesn't shout. It hums. It's not the thrill of infatuation. It's the grounding of truth. And it invites you to come home to yourself. But here's a thought worth sitting with. What if the soul doesn't always crave calm? What if, sometimes, your true soulmate isn't the one who soothes you, but the one who awakens something wild and unfinished inside you?
2. When you meet your soulmate, your heart doesn't settle, it awakens. Some loves comfort you, like a warm, still lake. But a soulmate? Sometimes they arrive like lightning over the ocean, quiet at first, then electrifying. You feel more alive, not because they complete you, but because they remind you of the parts of yourself you tucked away decades ago. For me, it was the way I started writing again. Not because she asked me to, not even because I meant to, but because her presence stirred something that had long gone silent. I would find myself awake at 4 a.m., pen in hand, heart restless, not with worry, but with wonder. And that's what a true soulmate does. They don't just calm you, they challenge you. Not with harsh words, but with their very being. They stand as a mirror to your unlived life and say, "There's more in you yet." You begin to ask different questions, not from regret, but from renewal. Not about what time has taken from you, but about what it might still give. Desires you once shelved with a quiet sigh now re-emerge, not as fantasies, but as invitations. That trip you postponed is no longer an escape, it becomes a promise to yourself. That book, not a legacy, but a way to finally say something that has lived in you for years. That letter, a bridge to unfinished forgiveness or unexpected connection. In their presence, you don't just want to feel, you want to create. You want to plant something, even if the harvest is small, because the act of becoming again, of stretching towards something new, reminds you that aliveness doesn't end with age, it only deepens. And that is the quiet revolution of meeting a soulmate later in life. The realization that longing was never a sign of emptiness. It was a sign that your soul was still awake and waiting. But what happens when that awakening isn't met with words, but with silence? Let's explore that in the next shift. It's not always comfortable. Sometimes it shakes you, but in the best way, like opening a window in a stuffy room. You feel the air rush back in. This kind of love isn't about finding peace in another. It's about finding the courage to become more yourself than you've ever been. But awakening comes with a risk. It asks you to be honest, not just with them, but with yourself. And that can be the most confronting part of all. Which brings us to the next shift, something quieter, but no less powerful, the way silence begins to feel like conversation.
3. When you meet your soulmate, silence begins to feel like conversation. Have you ever sat beside someone in total silence and felt more seen than you did in a room full of words? After 60, we've learned that talk is easy, but connection is rare. We've heard sweet promises, long speeches, and polite pleasantries. But real intimacy? That happens in the quiet. With a soulmate, silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of comfort, full of awareness, full of an unspoken truth that says, "You don't need to explain. I already know." It's like two trees standing side by side, roots deep in the same soil, branches touching the same wind. No need for noise. Their presence is enough. And maybe that's why, for many of us, this kind of connection feels both familiar and unsettling, because it invites us to pause, to let go of filling space just to feel safe, to trust that being known doesn't always require being heard. And if this moment resonates with you, if you've ever felt that sacred quiet with someone, take a second to like this video. It helps this space reach others who've been craving a different kind of love. This kind of silence is sacred because it holds you without holding you back. It allows for rest. It allows for presence. And it allows you to finally breathe without armor. But silence, as comforting as it is, also strips away the noise we once used to protect ourselves. It brings with it an unexpected companion, vulnerability. Not the weakness we once feared, but a kind of raw honesty we spend most of our lives avoiding. When we're no longer hiding behind words, our hearts step forward, unshielded, uncertain, and fully alive. In that stillness, what we truly feel has room to rise. The grief we never spoke, the joys we never fully celebrated, the small, quiet truths that went unshared for decades. And suddenly, there's nowhere to hide, but also no need to, because the person beside you doesn't flinch. They don't retreat. They remain. And perhaps that's the greatest gift of this kind of silence. It teaches you that your softness isn't a flaw. It's a doorway. A doorway we'll step through in the next shift, where love begins not just to comfort you, but to witness your pain and remain. And perhaps that's the quiet miracle of the next shift. Not that someone sees the places in you you've hidden for decades, but that they remain anyway. Not out of duty or pity, but presence. Because to be fully seen and not abandoned, that may be the most sacred experience a soul can have.
4. When you meet your soulmate, your wounds no longer scare you. There comes a time when the deepest pain is no longer in the memory of the wound itself, but in the silence that followed it, the loneliness of having carried it alone. After 60, many of us have grown used to that silence. We've wrapped our griefs in politeness, tucked them behind smiles, and learned how to walk without limping, even when it hurt to stand. But a true soulmate changes the atmosphere, not because they say the perfect thing, but because they don't turn away. Their presence becomes an open field where your pain is allowed to breathe. They offer no shortcuts, no dismissive comfort, just stillness. And that stillness, paradoxically, speaks everything you've ever needed to hear. To be met in your rawness and not made smaller, that's where healing begins. And not the kind of healing that scrubs you clean of the past. No, this is a deeper kind, a healing that honors the wound as part of the sacred map that led you here. A healing that doesn't require forgetting, but remembering more truthfully, with softness.
Because here is something we often forget. Our pain is not our disqualification from love. It is our proof that we've lived. It is the evidence of a soul that dared to feel deeply, to lose, to try again. And when someone can sit with that, truly sit with it, they become more than a partner. They become a witness to the life you've lived in silence, a companion to the parts you've been told to hide. And in their gaze, you finally start to see those places as worthy, not in spite of the scars, but because of them. But love doesn't stop at acceptance. It keeps moving. It grows, stretches, even reshapes itself over time. Which brings us to the next part. What happens when two souls continue to evolve together?
5. When you meet your soulmate, they evolve with you, not despite the changes, but because of them. Some people love the version of you they first met and expect you to stay that way forever. To them, change feels like a threat. Growth becomes betrayal. And over time, you learn to shrink, to edit yourself, to stay inside the lines they've drawn around who you were. But a soulmate, they move with you, like a river that doesn't resist its own bends. They welcome your unfolding. When you shift, whether subtly or dramatically, they don't panic. They don't tighten their grip in fear of losing you. Instead, they lean in. Like a tree that bends with the wind, they move with you, trusting that growth is not a departure, it's part of the dance. And unlike others who might try to anchor you to a version of yourself they once loved, your soulmate doesn't freeze frame you. They don't fall in love with your consistency. They fall in love with your becoming. Their love is not a container, but a current. It doesn't ask you to stay the same. It flows beside you through the bends. Because to them, the unfamiliar is not something to resist. It's something to explore. And so they keep asking, keep listening, not to bring you back to who you were, but to meet you again, as you are now. That kind of love feels like freedom. But freedom can be disorienting too, which raises a deeper question. What if two people evolve with honesty, but their paths begin to diverge? What if love's final gift is learning how to let go? And you do the same for them. This kind of love doesn't fear evolution. It expects it. It knows that after 60, the changes may be quieter, but they are no less sacred. A new rhythm of your days, a deepening spiritual practice, a loosening of old identities, a call to something slower, simpler, or more truthful. With a soulmate, these changes aren't obstacles to love. They are love. Because what you're building together is not a snapshot. It's a living, breathing relationship. One that asks both of you to keep showing up, not just for who the other has been, but for who they are still becoming. But here's the paradox. What happens when two people grow, but not always in the same direction? Can a connection still be sacred if it eventually asks us to part? So the question deepens. What if love,
at its highest form, isn't about holding on, but knowing exactly when to release with grace. Let's walk gently now into the next part, where love doesn't end, but transforms into something quieter, harder, and perhaps even more sacred. The art of letting go while keeping the heart open.
6. When you meet your soulmate, you may one day have to let them go and still love them. It may begin with a silence that feels different. Not the peaceful kind, not the intimate kind, but the kind that stretches across time zones or across rooms and begins to echo. You both feel it, but neither says it. There comes a point in some soul-deep connections where love still exists, but life has redrawn the map. Maybe it's illness, maybe it's distance, maybe it's the quiet, irreconcilable pull of two spirits growing in opposite directions. The hardest truth? Even soulmates can outgrow the season they once shared. Letting go doesn't mean the love was wrong. It means it was real, so real that it shaped you. And now, with equal reverence, you must release it. Not with bitterness, but with blessing. Not with a slammed door, but with an open window. I've seen it before. Two people who loved each other honestly, but chose different paths when one needed freedom and the other needed home. And even in that parting, the connection didn't die. It changed form. Like water turning to mist, it became something intangible, but no less true. Letting go of a soulmate isn't about forgetting them, nor is it an act of detachment. It's the quiet art of remembering without reaching, of holding their essence in your life the way a melody lingers long after the music ends. Their presence lives in the way you pause before you speak, in the way you notice small beauty, in the softened edges of your grief. To carry their imprint forward is not to live in the past, but to walk with what their love awakened in you. The letting go is not a release of them. It's a return to yourself, changed, expanded, and deeply aware that some people never truly leave. They simply step back and become part of your inner landscape, like a mountain on the horizon that guides you, even as you move further from its base. And if this moment feels tender, save this video. Come back to it when your hands are tired from holding on and your heart needs a place to rest. Because in some rare cases, letting go is not the end of the story. It's the making of a different kind of love, one rooted not in possession, but in grace. And that leads us to the final shift, perhaps the most important of all, what your soulmate teaches you about yourself. 7. When you meet your soulmate, you see yourself more clearly than ever before. Not through compliments, not through admiration, but through a kind of mirror only love can offer, unfiltered, unwavering, and deeply compassionate. Your soulmate is not a flawless reflection. They don't just show you what is lovely. They reveal what is unfinished, what is hidden, what is still becoming.
and they do so without judgment. That is their greatest gift. Through them, you begin to see the strength in your softness, the wisdom in your wounds, the beauty in the parts of yourself you once tried to erase. You begin to trust your own rhythms again, to honor your intuition, to forgive your past, not because it was easy, but because it made you who you are. This kind of clarity doesn't always arrive with grand revelations. It arrives quietly, like mist softening the edges of what once felt sharp. It's in the stillness of being seen, not for who you tried to be, but for who you are when no one is watching. It's in the way they hold space for your silence, as if it speaks volumes. They notice what you overlook, not because they're looking for flaws, but because they're attuned to your essence. They reflect your growth before you've named it, like a garden blooming before you realize you've been tending it. And in their love there is no scoreboard, no proving ground, only presence, a witnessing. This is not the kind of recognition that inflates the ego. It's the kind that humbles the heart. Because to be loved without striving, to be met where you are and still called deeper, that is the most radical invitation to become fully yourself. And over time, you realize they didn't give you something you didn't already have. They simply helped you remember. Remember that you are whole, that you are worthy, that you are and have always been enough. Because the deepest purpose of a soulmate is not just to walk with you, it is to awaken you, to remind you of the vast, luminous being you are beneath the years, the roles, and the noise. So if you've ever wondered whether you've met your soulmate, or whether it's still possible, maybe the better question is, who are you becoming in their presence? And does that version of you feel like coming home? Take care of that answer. It will tell you everything you need to know.
So what truly happens when you meet your soulmate? You begin to soften where you once braced. You awaken to dreams you thought had withered. You discover that silence can hold more love than words ever could. You see your wounds no longer as liabilities, but as openings. You learn that real love isn't afraid of change. It moves with it. You find that sometimes the deepest form of love is letting go. And perhaps most sacred of all, you come back to yourself more whole than you've ever been. Soulmates don't complete you. They reflect you. They don't fix you. They witness you. And through that witnessing, you remember not only what love is, but who you are. This video wasn't just about love. It was about becoming, about memory, about healing, about hope that doesn't fade with time, but sharpens with age. And if any part of this reflection stirred something within you, like the feeling of being seen, or the longing to find someone who mirrors the truest part of your soul, don't hesitate to like this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear these words today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. There's more to come. More wisdom, more softness, more reminders that love, real love, never expires. Until we meet again, be gentle with your story. You never know who is learning how to love themselves by watching you love yourself.